all, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone. Apologies for the hiatus, we've been very busy moving country. But secondly, I'd like to thank everyone for the overwhelmingly positive feedback that the application has received over the last 2 months. It's been overwhelmingly positive. There's been some negative comments as well, or not necessarily negative, but constructive, and I appreciate those as well. But one thing I do wanted to really quickly cover off on before we get into some of the frequently asked questions and the small feature updates for the next version is that if you leave a negative comment or you need help and you leave something on the feedback portion of the website or in the Discord or on social media, if you don't leave a way for me to get back to you, then I can't help you. If you leave a fake email address, I can't help you. If you don't leave any email address, I can't help you. I don't expect people to know how IP networks work or even how their home network is set up. But if you leave a comment like app sucks, won't connect with no way of me helping you, then that's, I can't help you. So leave a comment, leave your email address, or jump in the Discord, and either myself or even someone from the community will do their best to help you as quick as possible. All right, now we'll quickly cover off on some of the frequently asked questions that I've received over the last couple of months, not in any particular order. But the first one is, can I change the IP address and or port of the server? Just kind of like two questions in one, but yes, you can change the port that the server is running on. No, you can't change the IP address because the IP address is taken directly from your local address on your network card. So when you start the server by hitting the power button, it gets this from the computer itself, that IP address. And then when the port is set to auto, that's 49,200 by default, but you can change that. So if I highlight that and change it to 49201, then that will be the new port. And you can use any of the ports available to Windows. You can do a wiki search and find out what they are. But if you just type back in auto, then that'll be back to 49200. The next one is, where can I find out what server version or what client version that I'm running? Both on the client and on the server on this main screen where you see the power button. Down the bottom right hand corner, down here you will see typically release or beta depending on your access, and then if you click that, it'll show you the latest patch notes for that version. The next one is, can I change which VJoy device number that GameTouch uses, because I already use VJoys for other things with Joystick Gremlin, etc. Or you have Virpils or VKBs that actually use the same VJoy driver and there's a conflict. Yes, you can. If you see up on the server I'm running here, you'll see the number 4 in here. That indicates what VJoy device number that you're using. You can just highlight that and change it if you want it to be 3, 2, etc. up to whatever number that you've set. And to change that in Windows, if you search for VJoy, there'll be a configure VJoy application, and when it opens up, you will get a list of up to 16 devices that you can add, and you just use a little add device button down here. And while we're on this, I'll cover off on something which is another question, and is setting the number of VJoy buttons. So the default when you first install VJoy is 8. So even if you just are happy with the default set device as number 1, you should come in here and change this to 32. And the reason for that is then you can use up to 32 buttons when you're setting the actual buttons in the application itself. So that leads into the next question, and is, can I use VJoy buttons instead of keys when configuring the buttons in the application? And the answer to that is also yes. So if I connect my tablet here, and let's say I go into the FPS button and I want to configure the torch, which by default is set to T. Now if I type in Joy 31, now that I've got up to 32, so anywhere between Joy 1 and Joy 32, you can enter into there, save that. And now if we check it in Windows, you can see when I push torch that the VGI button 31 is flashing. And you bind that in the same way you do any other joystick button in Star Citizen. So the next one is I've installed VJoy, I've connected some other joysticks, and now my joysticks in Star Citizen don't match up with the controls that I used to have. So for example, maybe you have pedals and your pedals are now doing your ship flight controls, pitch and yaw, or now VJoy is doing your flight pitch and yaw, and your sticks are doing what your pedals used to do. And is there a way that I can fix that? The answer is yes, you can do that within Star Citizen itself, or you can use the app to make that a simpler process for you. So on the main screen of the app, you'll see a button up the very top middle that says Joy Binds, and if you go to that and hit Get IDs, so long as Star Citizen is running, it will come down with a list of what joysticks you have connected and then what joystick number Star Citizen recognizes those as. You can see joystick 1 is my Logitech G13, 2 is the VJoy, and 3 is my flight stick HOTAS 1. Now if we go into the flight, we can see that if I move the GameTouch controller axis here, then that's actually flying my ship. And if I go into the Star Citizen settings, in keybinds for the HOTAS, you'll see that it's bound to like input 2, which in our joy binds, input 2 is the VJoy device. So they've all been swapped to the next one when we install VJoy or when we connected another controller. So now we can see that VJoy is 2 and my HOTAS is 3. So if I just do the drop down list here, 2 to 3, and hit swap, it'll quickly run the console command in Star Citizen to do that for you. And they'll now be swapped. And as you can see now, my sticks are controlling my flight again. So the next question is, why whenever I restart the application are none of my changes being saved, even though I've created a profile? And the answer is they are being saved, but you probably haven't set those changes to be the default profile. So within the application there are 2 profiles that come with the application itself, default and standard. Standard is a profile that you can't overwrite. You can load it and then make changes and save it as something else, but if you save it as standard, it will just re-overwrite itself when the application starts. Default is the main one that we're concerned with here. It's the one that loads every time the application starts. And then you can go through and make as many other profiles as you want. So if we go to the default profile now, we can see that it's the same as the standard profile because that's what it is by default when it ships. But let's say we load up another profile that we've made changes to. We've called it test, and it's purple and orange. So now if we want this profile, if we want to make some changes to it, we can let's say change the torch from being Joy 31 that we changed it to earlier back to the default, which was T. Save that. And now this is what we want to load every time we start the application. The set default button, which is up here third from the top right, if we push and hold that down, we'll get a little green tick that appears, and that means that this has now been set as the default profile and the profile that will start when the application starts. So we'll go back to standard, and now if we load the default profile, it should be the pink and purple one that we just set to be our default profile, which is going to be the exact same as test. However, the test one won't have the change to T that we made because we didn't save that. The next question I frequently get is, why don't some of the buttons work, like open and close doors? And the reason for that is because whilst I have a button set for open and close doors built into the app, as you can see here, it's left alt, left control and C. Star Citizen itself, by default, does not have a button for open and close doors. So what we can do is just go into the Star Citizen settings, and because it's just like pushing the buttons when you push the button on the application, the easiest way to configure it is just double click, and when it says waiting for input, push the open and close doors button, for example, hit yes, and you'll see now that that is left alt, left control, and C. One of the other frequently asked questions I got is, can I make the screens transition like the get out of seat, or why does the screen transition happen and can I stop that from happening? Yes, you can. If we use flight for an example, by default all of the leave seat buttons are set to transition to the FPS screen, except for I think the mining panel. And you can change that on any button that you like in the configure. Push the button. This very last on the very right hand side with the drop down arrow, they are shortcuts to which screen is going to automatically transition to when you push the button. So as you can see, it's set to FPS on this one. We can change it to flight combat, which is the second flight panel, mining vehicles, turret, communications, cinematics, or nil. Nil being it won't transition. So if we do nil, save that, it now won't transition. Or we can do home, which is the main screen, or previous, which is the previous screen. So now that it's set to the previous screen, if we go from home to flight, it will go back to home. If we go from FPS and flight ready is set to transition to the flight panel, if we hit leave seat, it will go back to FPS because that was the previous one. So I suppose the last frequently asked question I get is, can we have a panel just for emotes? And the answer is yes, when I get around to making it. But the second part with that is, people ask, can I have a button for X feature of Star Citizen? And yes, you can. All of the buttons can be configured. So to answer, I suppose, two of those questions in one answer, if I go to the comms panel and then I want to make a emote for salute, you can see I've already got one made here. It's left alt numpad 1 there for salute. And then I go into the Star Citizen settings and I find salute here, double click that for input, push my salute button, and then we'll see that's left alt numpad 1. The second part that goes along with that answer is that the only default configured emotes that come with Star Citizen are these first 6, and none of those actually work. So yes, you can have emotes, but you'll still have to configure them yourself, and you can configure any of the buttons that already exist on the application to be those if you want, including ones that don't function via a button, using the console quick chat options on the comms panel. But you could even configure, for example, on the FPS panel, these unbound ones could be other emotes as well. Well, I hope that covers off on a lot of questions that I got asked, if some of other people may have been having them as well, and what's kind of new in the update that'll be out within the next few hours. Have fun, everyone, enjoy. And remember, if you speak to anyone about it and tell them, hey, try this out, let them know if they have any issues, please contact me on Discord or leave their email address. I'll do my best to help them as soon as I can. But leaving comments with no sort of way of getting back to people isn't really helpful for anyone. 07.